going live. This Hangout on air is live. Good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this random Hangout. We are gathered here today. Today we're going to, maybe I should say, ladies and gentlemen, we're here for the Kirkpatrick model. Good or bad, the epic mega battle continues. This particular hangout was inspired by our friends and colleagues in e-learning, Dr. Clark Quinn and Dr. Will Thalheimer, who have a fabulous, that's a great word, blog post talking about this particular topic, and just reading through it was awesome, and reading the comments was even better, and inspired me to rally the two to join me in a hangout and to have this conversation live and to get some input from audiences and whatnot. So just for the sake of administrative stuff, I've got Meerkat going. For those of you that don't know what Meerkat is, you can download it to your app, and I'm kind of streaming it from there. So we have an active group of folks on the users. I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek because they're not using the chat box, but that's okay. We'll forgive them this time if they're just watching. Maybe we're just background music. We're white noise today for them. So anyways, so we got one viewer on the Google Hangout. Awesome. Good to have you. And so this is how we're going to go. I'm going to introduce the two, our special guests today, and we're going to then talk a little bit about what the Kirkpatrick model is. I've got it right straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak, actually from the horse's website. So I'll read a blurb from the Kirkpatrick website on how they define the model they created, he created. And we'll jump right in. We'll look a little bit at some of the comments and some of the engaging conversation that Will and Clark had, and then we'll just go freeform from there and just have it out and figure out where we go from here as training and instructional professionals. So without any further ado, let's start with introductions. And Clark, since you're on my immediate left on my screen, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I'm Clark Quinn, and of Quinnovation. I have been involved in learning and technology for only over 35 years, just a beginner. Games, mobile, strategy have been things I've done in the past. I help organizations try and align their use of technology with how we really think, work, and learn. There's a lot of evidence that what we're doing is not. And part of it is looking at the right tools. And it's been great fun having a relationship with my colleague Will Thalheimer in this for a number of years now, and it's great fun to debate with them, but also to work with him to try and help improve the industry. Will?
Thanks, Clark. Let me do a quick sound check. Am I better now? I think I changed my microphone.
Still faint, but...
Still faint? All right. I'll play with that when you're talking then. So my name is Will Thalheimer. I am president of Work Learning Research, and that sounds like I might have a 10,000-person consulting firm, but no, it's just me. And what I do is do research translations. Every year I spend, well, I should say almost every year, I read over 200 articles from the scientific referee journals on learning, memory, and instruction, and try to figure out, cut through the jargon, cut through the theoretical baggage, and try to find out what learning factor they implemented and what the result was, and then try to translate the findings for real people, for e-learning developers, for trainers, for instructional designers, chief learning officers, etc. I've been in the field almost 30 years now, and for the last 17 I've been doing this work learning research where I've been trying to bridge the gap between the research side and the practice side. As Clark knows, the research in our field, at least the good research, doesn't pay that much. So the other things I do are audits, learning audits, work learning audits, speaking engagements, keynotes, workshops, consulting, and that kind of thing. And as evidence from our online repartee between Clark and I like to think about how what we do and how the science of learning affects or doesn't affect what's going on in our field. So it's kind of fun to do this, and Clark and I will probably, be kind of passionate here today, but we're in a big bear hug because we're trying to learn from each other, and both have great respect for one another's work. So it's fun. It's good fun in the cage here.
Yeah. So speaking of the cage, let's define the chain link boundary, so to speak, and what we're going to be talking about today. So let's just jump right into that. What I'll do is, since we have this newfangled awesome technology, I will start by share my screen real quick here. So present to everyone. So we'll see how this goes. So Dr. Don Kirkpatrick, I don't know, I think I referred to him as John Kirkpatrick. Most humble apologies at one point a while ago. But anyways, in the 1950s came up with the Kirkpatrick model and the 4 levels of measuring success. Oh, you can't hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see anything on the screen.
Oh, I thought I was... It says you are screen sharing and presenting to everyone.
I don't know about you, Will, but all I'm seeing is, what it looks like when your camera is off.
Oh, and Will can't hear me now.
Hello, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I think stop screen sharing for one. And
all right, let's just do that. We'll go back. All right, everybody go find the website yourself. How about that? Google it, Kirkpatrick Partners. All right, so here's the deal. We've got 4 levels of when we evaluate our instruction. And coming directly from the website, they list the Kirkpatrick model as level 1 is reaction. To what degree participants react favorably to the training. We often refer to them as smile sheets, correct? Level 2, learning. To what degree participants acquire the intended knowledge, skills, attitudes, confidence, and commitment based on their participation in a training event. Level 3, behavior. To what degree participants apply what they learned during training.
Hey, this is Will. I hope you can't hear me. I'm testing out my microphone here, trying to make it work right. That sounds pretty
now
good.
You're on.
Looks like it's working well.
That sounds
Apologies
great.
if I'm coming through.
Back.
I can't hear anything.
Oh, but your volume's back. And then where was I? So level 3 is behavior. Level 4, results. To what degree targeted outcomes occur as a result of the training event and subsequent reinforcement. So quick overview, as complicated as that was. Level 1, reaction. Level 2, learning. Level 3, behavior. Level 4, results. All right. Are we all in agreement on that?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what it is. And just for a note to self, they also do have a New World Kirkpatrick model that you can click on and hit the website for. And they do show a couple things that they added. So in the reaction version, the New World editions are engagement and relevance. In level 2, learning, what they added for New World editions was confidence and commitment. In behavior, they added required drivers, so processes and systems that reinforce, encourage, and reward performance of critical behaviors on the job. And level 4, the New World edition, was leading indicators, so short-term observations and measurements suggesting that critical behaviors are on track to create a positive impact on desired results. So,
and if
let's start with what we don't use it for, or what we do use it for, or why we use it. Clark, you want to start?
Um, sure. So the point I like about Kirkpatrick, and there's some things I don't like about it. Well, he himself admits he numbered it wrong. But what I like about it is it starts at level 4 with the change you want in the organization. And then you go to level 3 and you say, what would people be doing differently to achieve that outcome than what they're doing now? And then how do we get them there as level 2? I don't care a lot about level 1. As Will aptly points out, there's very little correlation between what people think of a learning experience and whether it's actually effective or not. He'll have more to say on that forthcoming. But what I like is that alignment. What goes horribly wrong is that people do level 1. You know, if you look at the graph, and ATD has graphed how people report, whether they use level 1, 2, 3, or 4. Let's see if I get this right on the camera. It drops down. Maybe it's the other way, but they do a lot of level 1 and less level 2 and almost no level 3 and essentially negligible amount of level 4, which is just barking mad. If you're not, you know, it should be flat. Level 4, level 3, level 2. Yeah, again, I don't care about level 1. So it's a good alignment. There's two things wrong. I think it can be used for more than, you know, learning. It could be using job aids or things as well to impact the business outcome. They tend to focus on training. And again, they numbered it backwards, so too many people aren't stopping at level 4. So that's my brief overview of what I like about it. Now we'll give Will a chance to try and eviscerate the model.
Wow. Now, just a nod of heads. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So sorry I had technical difficulties. So in the online discussion, I started it out and basically made the statement that I don't like what the Kirkpatrick model does for the industry. And as Clark said, number one, let's look at the results. The results are that most of us are relying on level 1 smile sheets. That's where we get our feedback. And that's a problem because if we don't have good feedback as learning professionals, we're not able to create those virtuous cycles of continuous improvement. In fact, what I argue in my workshops and in my speaking engagements and in the book that's about to be published on performance-focused smile sheets is that we are left in the dark in a lot of our learning evaluations. It's like we're golfers hitting golf balls into the dark. We don't know whether we're slicing them, we don't know whether we're hooking them, we don't know whether they're going straight, how far, and we can't get better as a golfer if we can't see where the ball lands. We can't see the trajectory. And we as learning professionals have that same problem. So, bottom line is the Kirkpatrick model's been around 50, 60 years, and still most of us are not doing a very good job in doing learning evaluation. So that's sort of a bottom line thing. Now, I can't put that on the back of Donald Kirkpatrick. That wouldn't be fair. It's how you use a model that really makes the difference. But here's some of the things that are problematic. Number one, the model connotes, and I've heard the Kirkpatricks say this, that it's a causal pathway from level 1 to level 2 to level 3 to level 4. Well, it's not a causal pathway. Number one, there's very good scientific evidence that smile sheets are not correlated with learning results. There was a meta-analysis in the 1990s that showed a 0.09 correlation, which is no correlation at all, basically. Another meta-analysis, a study of many studies in the 2000s, showing that smile sheets are not correlated with learning results. So obviously, a disconnect there. Ramping up into the higher levels, when we talk about learning.
Let me just hold you off right there. So let's hit on that one spot. So that seems like a good spot since so many people are do the smile sheets, right? They do the level 1, and a lot of people are very interested in trying to understand the learning. Let's just kind of focus on that one spot for a second here. And so your point is, let me just make sure that I'm clear, and that everybody else is that there is So the information and the feedback that we get from level 1 reactionary survey smile sheets does not correlate with the learning that we assume occurs in level 2 and that we want to measure.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay. Okay, so what we're saying that often happens is that people stop at level 1 assuming that since they got a lot of great feedback on their smile sheets that, yay, our course is good and it's going to be impactful and everything's great, but it doesn't actually lead to learning, and therefore we're patting ourselves on the back thinking we're successful when we know that had we done a level 2 we would have found out that maybe they didn't really learn as much as we thought, and therefore why did we even do the training?
That's right. And let me make this concrete. If you get really high marks on your smile sheet, it could mean that you have a very effective course. But it could equally mean that you have a very ineffective course. And the opposite is true. You get bad marks on your smile sheets, you could have an ineffective course, you could have a very effective course. We just can't tell. So bottom line, they're not telling us much, and they're probably encouraging us to some superstitious behaviors. Things that we probably now focus on are being entertaining in the classroom by keeping the learners engaged even if it's not supporting of learning. You know, having people that are really good presenters but are empty vessels. They're just not really providing good content, etc. So it's a problem in those feedback loops, absolutely.
So Clark,
and I will add one other thing in that at least one of the meta-analyses also looked at the correlation with level 3, the performance on the job, and they also found very low correlation. So it's not just about level 2 learning; it's really about taking it up the whole chain.
Right. Okay. So Clark, jump in here. Add some thoughts.
Well, first I want to clarify, when you say they also correlated with level 3, they correlated level 1 with level 3 well?
Yes.
Well, again, no argument. Level 1 isn't very useful. And in fact, as far as I'm concerned, ignore it. The whole point is to start with level 4. So let me be clear. Kirkpatrick is horribly misused. No argument. Should we give up on PowerPoint because people, death by bullet point? I don't necessarily agree. I like Keynote better because it tends to try and keep you from having massive numbers of bullet points, but that's, an issue. But I'm open to any other model that starts with the impact on the business and works backwards. I don't see any other model. The one thing he did blissfully right was say, start with a measurable problem in the organization and work backwards. That is so right. It's also seen in sort of the K-12 space and understanding by design, but they're not focused on business impact. They're focused on learning outcomes. But we need to hammer on that so much. There's so little of that around. It's the one framework that does that. Now, the fact that people misunderstand it and misuse it, yes, it's a horrible problem. Maybe it needs remarketed. Maybe it needs a new model. But who else is talking about that?
Well, so I believe that a model ought to send certain messages to its users, messages that help guide the performance of those users. If this Kirkpatrick model has been around for 50, 60 years and it's sending the wrong messages or people aren't picking up on the right messages, can't we at least be a little suspicious and blame the model a little bit?
Please, give me an alternative.
Okay.
I need to get together, Will, and create.
Time out. We're not at alternatives yet, Clark. You're jumping the gun.
But Clark, that's a great idea. Let's write a book.
No, so I get it, right? I think this is the interesting, fun thing for me is that I think we're all on the same page with all this stuff. But the part that just doesn't seem to be clear to as an industry as a whole is that I feel like we all need to kind of get on the same page here. So let's continue to kind of noodle on this for a little bit. So we've got
Brent, before you go, can I make one procedural thing? Do you have the chat window open on your screen?
I do, yes.
Okay, because somebody said they couldn't see the chat, and I was trying to.
Well, yeah. So like I said, you can't. So the chat for those of us, for me and you, the three of us, we can see the group chat in the Hangout. But for everyone else, I'm communicating with you via the comments on the Hangout page.
Oh, okay. Because I was posting URLs there, and I was hoping, to the Kirkpatrick model and to the original blog post. But anyways, I just wanted to disambiguate that logistically because I wanted to understand the user's experience here. I now
no, this is good learning. Yeah, this is good for all of us. So as you guys begin to talk, I'll try to cut and paste that stuff that you put in because that's great content. So I'll cut and paste that over to the window, and we can figure that out. So so back to this. So we want. So let's go. Let's look back a little bit historically, right? So. As you ended that, I kind of get the feeling that folks may have been using the Kirkpatrick model to define or to kind of help them define and go through their design process and the development of their training because they know that they have to then evaluate it, right? And maybe it was never really intended to be a part of that design process and more so of just the evaluation. Even though we know we have to develop based on what we want to evaluate at the end, was that in fact the intention back in the 50s? Like, let's consider the world we were living in the 50s and 60s when the model first came out and see if, like, was it as we look at it today, maybe flawed or not, whether we like it or not, could we have made the same argument in the 60s and 70s? Let me just set it up that way.
Well, one of the things that's true is that we have learned, or scientists have learned, a ton about learning that we didn't know then. So, Donald Kirkpatrick was asked, if I remember the story correctly, Donald Kirkpatrick was asked by ASTD, I think it was, to consider, how to think about this evaluation stuff. And he came up with a very, a model that has a lot of face validity, and it makes a lot of sense. You're going to do these, you're going to look at what people think, you're going to look at whether they get learning, you're going to look at whether they're changing their behavior on the job, you're going to look at the organizational benefits or not. So, makes a lot of sense. There was a recent research review in a top-tier scientific journal, the Psychological Science in the Public Interest, that said, look, the Kirkpatrick model ignores, 40 years, I'm not going to get the quote exactly right, but ignores 40 years of research on human learning, encourages people to take a checklist approach, and basically, is not as good as it could be. But they also said this. They said, you probably ought to use it because that's what everybody knows. That's what, it's captured everybody's attention. So sort of a bifurcation there. The levels have some face validity until you begin looking at the deeper side of learning. So, for example, and I know Clark, I can see Clark shaking his head here, but he says it's an impact model. I say, well, yeah, but shouldn't we, because it has to do with learning and performance, shouldn't we at least have some wisdom about learning in it? So, for example, learning isn't just learning. I mean, learning is such a fuzzy word. It means so many things. So a model that was going to be more prescriptive and more clear would get at, people need to comprehend the material, but they also need to remember it. They also need to be motivated to apply it. They need to have certain supports on the job to be able to implement it. We need to dig deeper. Let's say that, I'll give you an example. Let's say you find You do a whole level 1 through level 4 analysis of your learning program, and you find that there's been no change in the organization. There's been no behavior change. Well, okay, well then what do? You go back to the learning results. Well, yes, at the end of the learning program, they comprehended correctly everything we wanted them to know. Well, then there's a big gap. So maybe that's good enough, but then there's a gap. Did they remember it later? Well, we don't know because we didn't measure that. Were they motivated to apply what they've learned? No. Well, we don't really know that either. So it's clearly not enough to give us good information about sort of the causal chain of impacts that are going to lead to that organizational performance, which I agree with Clark we should get to. And by the way, let's recap now. We agree that traditional smile sheets are ineffective, both of us. We also agree that it'd be great to start with the organizational results. So what we're really talking about is the middle part. With that, I'm going to stop talking.
All right, Clark, what's your thoughts? I saw you shaking your head too.
Yeah. So there's a couple things wrapped up here that I want to tease apart a little bit. So when we identify a gap in the organization at level 4, what we want to do is design a program, and that might include some formal learning. It might include job aids. Typically, does both. I talk about backwards design, and then we work backwards and say, we need to design the resource, and we need to design the training that incorporates the resource and whatever. And I absolutely agree. We want to understand human learning and human performance to be able to design that solution at level 2. And if it isn't working, if it's if they're passing some test. But one of the things Kirkpatrick does nicely is goes from 4 to 3 to 2, saying, I want to look at the workplace performance. I don't want to know what they know. I want to know what they be able to do. And we align our learning that way. If our learning isn't working, if they're not doing, if we don't have a good objective, we failed using this to set it up. If we don't use the learning, if the learning isn't working, we need to evaluate that. And we need good tools, and Kirkpatrick isn't the tool for that. But what happens if they pass learning and then it's not manifesting in the workplace? Our support practices, which should be part of the design, part of the solution we design, isn't working, and we need to analyze that. Then if we're seeing the change in the workplace and it's not impacting the business, then we need to check, well, what we thought we needed to do differently in the workplace may not be what's really impacting the outcome. So it's an analytic tool, but it's not just about the learning. It's about You're right. Well, it does look at it. It is important to look at the support in the workplace as well to see if it's making it out there. But that's part of what this analyzes as well. I don't know much formal learning things, that analyze the effectiveness of our learning design that do that. So I still think that analyzing the learning design is important. That's not what Kirkpatrick's designed to do. It's to help us see if that learning is getting applied and is making a change, and then we can try and narrow down where it's falling apart if it's not.
Okay.
And it's an analytic tool in that sense that's a different and necessary component of doing it. And I admit it. He admits he numbered it wrong. I admit that he shouldn't necessarily have included level 1. Except after it's working, you might decide, well, are they also having a good learning experience, a subjective evaluation of the experience? I don't really care.
You're so cool.
All things being equal, having them like it versus not, in the sense of hard fun. It's not just lemonade and puppies, but if they're getting hard fun. So I want to just be clear that evaluating you get wound up that it doesn't have learning implicit in it. It's not about how do you design the learning experience. It's how do you align the learning experience, which is a slightly different thing. Sorry.
Well, okay. Yep. So that's where I think we have agreements and disagreements. So the disagreement is that it's not about learning, even though I think that was the original purpose to talk about training evaluation, and training is supposed to be about learning, although we know training isn't the only way to learn, and we look at prompting mechanism, performance support, etc., and on-the-job learning, etc. So there is wisdom we probably ought to, let's make this useful for our audience here. That there is wisdom in the model, and the wisdom is that, we ought to think about what the ultimate effects of our, and let me call it a learning and performance intervention. Okay, so it could be a training, it could be job aid, it could be facilitation of some kind, it could be adding glucose to the coffee or whatever. So the wisdom is that you're looking for an endpoint. The breakdown where I see it is that the model doesn't connote all the things we ought to look at, all the opportunities we have, the leverage points that we have as learning and performance professionals to make a difference. If we're evaluating our intervention, shouldn't the evaluation models that we use clue us in or hint at the kind of leverage points that we actually have to make things better?
Well, there isn't going to be, in my mind, any model that would try and be so complex to account for everything, and I've seen if you do this, tends to end up not, it's like the Swiss Army knife. It tries to do everything and then ends up being only adequate at any of it, and you have better off tools for each of the components. I agree with you that we should try and pull out the good. My complaint has been that L&D doesn't care about aligning with the impact. And so they're used level 1 and level 2, and all they measure is how much does it cost per butt per seat per hour, and they benchmark that against the industry. And nobody's determining whether that seat in that butt per hour is doing any good. And that's what I'm rabid about, is trying to change that mindset. And Kirkpatrick's is the only tool around that now in the Twitter, one of our attendees pointed out the Brinkerhoff model. I'll go back and look at that. When I looked at the other models at the time, none of them seemed to have as much clear alignment as Kirkpatrick did in a simple way. But that's what I care about, and I'm willing to throw out Kirkpatrick if we can get to something else that, I don't care if it's backward design or universal design or anything else, or understanding by design, that gets us to say, that's the problem in the org. We need to measure. This is the change in, that we determine if people do it this way, using this tool, and have this stuff in the world and this stuff in the head, that will fix that, and then let's design those solutions and make it. That's all I care about. But I have yet to see a tool that's clearer in trying to make that alignment. I just wish we'd use it well instead. But the problem in it being used wrong, is that lazy L&D, or is it inherent in the model?
Well, you're right. You don't want a model that's too complex, because then nobody uses it. I guess to me, maybe there's a happy medium somewhere. And some of the interim impacts that I'd like to look at are people able to remember? Are there so not just looking at on-the-job performance, but also some of the because that's what level 3 is about, but also some of the supports, resources, incentives as well involved in that. So there are, motivation to apply. There's a few other things that we could add. So not 4 things, but maybe 8 things that we could look at that would at least hint at some of the things that are missing in the model. And I think that would, everybody likes to simplify. Everybody wants to wrap their head around it. And I think we had a little more complex model. Then it would send the right messages to us as learning professionals, and we'd be more likely to measure things that make a difference.
So this is a good spot then to let's look at the recap again. So it all seems very complicated, and it doesn't feel like it should be. So we've got the 4 levels. We all agree on the 4 levels. We disagree on their use. Is that where we're at? Or their misuse, I guess, or the fact that we don't have an alternative.
Yes.
Well, first of all, you made the statement that it shouldn't be complicated, but human behavior, human cognition is infinitely complex. So we need to simplify because that's what's workable, but we also have to realize we're dealing with a very complex ecosystem, and so to oversimplify can be a mistake.
Yeah, so okay, so I get that, but maybe let's try to come at this from another angle. You both are you're working consultants with and have applied the work that you do in the real world. Let me throw out some scenarios in the real business world that may or may not have occurred in my professional life, or I've heard about from somebody, and maybe let's try to address it from that point. So you are a training manager, managing a training department, the training function within a corporation, and you have to train certain courses that are compliance courses that everybody must take. And there's no way around it. There is a legal mandate that this particular topic, pick any topic, sexual harassment, whatever, whatever. I don't think the content in this part of the conversation matters, but you've got a mandate that's forcing the training to occur. How does that work with Kirkpatrick's levels? And from a practical perspective, how far would you go down the 4 levels?
See, to me, that's a chimera. The compliance isn't done to affect the change of behavior in the organization. It's lip service. All it is CYA. If you really cared to change the behavior, you could do a level 4, what would the behavior change, design it, but nobody wants to pay for that. The lawyers just want the least cost, and the government mandates its amount of seat time. And as Gloria Giria said, we may as well just weigh them. It's as useful a metric as seat time is. But I don't, that, to me, compliance is something mandated and dictated by forces outside training. You shouldn't spend your money on it. You shouldn't be designing and developing compliance courses. Just go buy it off the shelf. It's not proprietary to your organization. Put this focus on interventions that matter to the business line, that say, we are not closing sales fast enough, or we're having too many errors in our performance. Business metrics, damn it. That's what we're talking about, not bloody compliance.
Well, let me I mean, the compliance stuff drives me nuts too, and I'm an optimist, and I hope someday that the employment lawyers will figure out that what they're asking for is not effective. Somebody's going to win a lawsuit and say, hey, yes, you followed all the rules, you rolled out your compliance training once a year, you covered your ass, but you didn't really, because you're really not trying to change performance. And eventually that'll change. But let's take an example. Let's take an example in the sales process. So maybe you've got a sales process that you want your salespeople to be more consultative, more relationship oriented, less pushing things at your customers, because you believe that will actually increase long-term your sales revenues and your profits. Okay, so there's a very simple case. So Clark, why don't you take us through what that would look like in terms of the Kirkpatrick model?
Well, the first thing you'd have to decide is what is the measure in the business that's happening. And what's happening is, right, so I take it as moving from selling to solution selling, okay? So we're looking to make sure that our does. That's something I'm familiar with from previous work. What you have to decide to measure is, how do you measure solution selling? What is the metric? And what it is probably, let's say, customer rating at the end of the sales process about how they feel about the company as a result of this. Let's say that's the delta we want to do, right? Afterwards, they buy the product, but they don't really feel good about the company because the salesperson was so pushy, they're not sure they really bought the best solution. They just succumbed to not listen to any more sales pitch. So let's say that's our measure. So, okay, we want to increase the customer experience at the end of the sales process. Now we have a metric. Then we go back and say, what would we change in the behavior of our sales folks, in the tools they use and the processes they use to achieve that? Well, we would probably spend more time with them up front, finding out their exact needs and helping them see that their needs are aligned with our product solution. Let's say that that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to have a better, investigation process to find out their needs and a better alignment of those needs to our products. And maybe it involves. Then we go through and we create those resources to support understanding that alignment and showing it to customers. And then we train the salespeople to use it. So then, we've identified that a resource coupled with a person we think is going to change that rating. And then we go in and we design our learning experience. And there's lots of tools we can do to verify that the objective of using that tool in a process with the client, and we'll do role plays and extended practice if we're doing it right, and check and evaluate that those are actually leading to the outcomes, that they can properly use those tools in a relationship with a simulated customer. And then we go out and so that's level 2. And again, I don't care if it's stuff about level 1. So level 2, we're looking at, are they using that tool and doing a friendlier and more concerned relationship with the customer? Then are we actually seeing them do that? We got to make sure the incentives are aligned, right? If they're still rewarded for product sales, they're not going to do this new, slower process that yields higher customers, or they're going to do whatever gets them higher rated. So we have to make sure that they're rewarded now on this customer rating. But then we see, is it happening in the workplace? I mean, are there managers and are the, the co-paired sales teams, they go out and have an observer? Are we observing this different process? Are they returning a form that shows a better understanding of salesperson analysis of the customer? And then at the end of the day, are we seeing an increase indeed in the customer satisfaction as a result of the sales process?
Okay, so let me, I just want to clarify. So what's your level 4 measure?
A customer satisfaction evaluation rating after the process and we install that metric either beforehand, so we get a baseline, or we have one group that goes through this training and one group that doesn't, and we have a A/B group, but we're evaluating customer satisfaction at the end of the experience.
Okay, so customer satisfaction, and that's done on a...
I'm making this up. I'm not an expert on sales.
That's fine. I know. I just want to clarify because you said a lot, and I just wanted people to know what bucket you're putting things in. So you'd have some kind of survey that you would give to the customers at the end of this, and everybody would agree. There'd be face validity. There'd be stakeholder agreement on that. Okay. What's level 3?
Level 3 is them using a new tool to gather customer needs more accurately.
Okay, so it'd be a measure. The tool would measure their level of use of these behaviors.
Well, what we would have is the salesperson come back with a form or something that indicates this customer and what their needs are.
Okay.
They're collecting that.
And what about
and mapping a product to it, and maybe even feedback back to the product group about how this product doesn't quite meet that need. But the core metric would be something like, I now have this data about customers that we know customers care about.
Okay, and level 2 would be?
Whether the salesperson is capable of using that tool in a dialogue with a customer to elicit the information on the tool that the tool captures, and can use that to map the best product to the customer.
So level 2 is what again? So say that again. Just,
using the tool in a relationship with a customer in a way that gathers the information and is able to use that to make a recommendation to the customer that the customer agrees is a good solution.
So why isn't that a level 3 behavior?
Because level 3 means they're actually doing it. Level 2 shows that they can do it in a simulated situation.
Oh, okay. So it's a simulated. Okay, all right, good. And we don't care about level 1, so we want to get into that. So you talked about what level 4, level 3, level 2 is, but before I asked you to put them in those buckets, you went into long explanation about the supports that they would get and some other things that are not inherent in the 4 levels, I think.
I will disagree.
Okay. Well, that's when you were talking, I'm thinking, wow, you're making my case for me there.
But it sounds so. Let me jump in as the neutral party and try to see if I get it, because honestly, I'm as confused as hell. So about the whole thing. So I mean, I get it, but so here's the deal. So to me, what it sounds like is like you could have gone through and developed that whole solution, Clark, without knowing or understanding Kirkpatrick's model. Because you just talked about kind of really good strategic process change to enable a sales force to be more effective and more impactful at what they do and have more success, correct?
Yes, and if you were that strategic and smart and aligning to measure, but let's talk about what really happens. Somebody comes to the training department and says, we need a course on solution selling, and they look up all the elements of solution selling and they present that information to you, and you pass a knowledge test on that solution selling. You go out and you don't change any behavior in the real world because it doesn't work. The process of working backwards from the need, and I was thinking on the fly, what would it take to cause that? That should be the thinking process, but starting as Will did with metrics for each one, ask me what were the metrics, make sure I'm aligning all those. And that I'd love for that exercise to happen, Brent, at any, I'd love it, and whether they do it with Kirkpatrick or not, but they don't. And so what I'm trying to do is give them a tool to use to help them begin that thinking process, and I'm welcome, again, any other.
No, I think Clark's absolutely right here. If they would have just started with what the solution that was suggested, the solution selling, they might have created a course, and then in that course somebody probably would create an instrument. Well, you need to remember what solution selling is. So I'm going to ask you a lot of sort of low-level trivia questions on your remembrance of what solution selling is, and the history of it, and who invented it, and that kind of thing. Whereas if you do start from the end in mind, you are reminded that you're going to need to jumpstart this and use good learning design. Now, what I think is that Clark, when he went through this, because he's a super smart guy and knows about how to create performance from learning, he added things to this discussion that many people wouldn't add. Like, he created these simulated exercises. Well, the Kirkpatrick model didn't give him that. That's from his years of understanding the cognition and the learning and that kind of thing. What the Kirkpatrick model did get him thinking about was what the performance situation was. And that is good, but that doesn't automatically make people jump to the solution of using simulation. That wisdom comes from somewhere else.
Well, Will, I'll agree in one sense, but I will slightly challenge it in that when you know what the change needs to be, the link between level 3 and level 2, we know what, by asking what do they need to be doing differently in the workplace, gives you a really nice alignment to say, well, then what does that assessment at the end of level 2 have to look like? So I said what they need to be doing is working better with the customer, and then I knew what the simulation, the scenarios, the role-playing had to be them using that tool in simulated relationships. So it did create an alignment. I added a lot of stuff, yes, but the alignment drove me to it.
What if the alignment was just waiting to see what happened? Because I'm getting, like, this is a long-term fix, right? This is sort of a change management, a sales enablement sort of scenario, right? And one of the reasons why I wanted to bring up compliance training is that I'm trying to bring this all back to be something a little bit more of a tactical conversation, right? There are many, many, many different types of solutions and different types of training, corporate training issues that corporate managers and corporate training professionals have to deal with on a regular basis. Do all of those require knowledge and understanding of Kirkpatrick's model in order to be successful in a training environment? I would say no.
Well,
No, you don't need it. If you already get that you need to solve real business problems, and AJ is saying, oh, you need somebody who understands biz perspective. No, AJ, I get biz perspective. The whole point is find the business impact by going out and talking to the business units. That's what Kirkpatrick, if you know that, and if you know to come back and make sure that I'm going to align my training to have that impact in the business, you don't need the Kirkpatrick model. I'm just saying too many people don't, and I want to give them a framework and explain the framework to hang it on. I'm not a great defender of Kirkpatrick. I think there's, weaknesses in it and misnumbering and stuff, but it's a tool that people have heard of that we can educate them about. That's, but sure, Brent, if they will get that by using backwards design, as I talked about in a paper once, or if they get it by talking about understanding by design, I don't care where it comes from. I just care that it comes.
Yeah, and I do too. So, there's many. Kirkpatrick model has some blind spots in it, but in our field, there's many of our models that have blind spots in them, and so some of this, some of this designing for the wrong thing comes from some of our other blind spots. So I'll give you one example. One of the memes in our field is that you ought to start with learning objectives. Well, what that does too often, people interpret that to mean that they're going to try to figure out what learning points they want to get across, and then they design to those learning points. And Clark's right. Well, that's not good enough. You need to think about what sort of the end product is. So I'm developing, and it's mostly in my mind, although I've written some of it down, what I call full source evaluation. And part of this process begins with having more than one type of objective. So we have learning objectives. We have what I call situation objectives. So we want to think about what the situation people are going to have to use something in the workplace. So we ought to have a list of learning objectives. Let's put you in a big room, right? And on one wall you got yellow stickies with your learning points you want to get across. You don't do that first, by the way. You also have on another wall a list of the situations that you're going to have people perform in, and that can get very micro if you want to get down to it. You also have what I call evaluation objectives, and I'll give you an example to explain this. So let's say you're teaching, you have a need for better coaches in your customer support, your customer representatives, but not just the representatives, the people that coach the representatives. And I'm blanking on what they're typically called. But anyway, the coaches of the customer service folks. And you want them to coach better so that the representatives do a better job creating good customer service, etc. So instead of thinking about Kirkpatrick, you could think about Kirkpatrick, there'd be value in that, but instead of thinking about Kirkpatrick, just think about what your evaluation objectives would be. Well, we know that from the research that the people who can evaluate coaching the best are the people that get the coaching. So let's decide that we're gonna measure the coachees' ratings of the coaches. All right, that will be our evaluation objective. We'll run that up a flagpole. We'll share that with our stakeholders. We'll use a validated instrument. We'll get everybody's input. Yes, this is where we stand. These are our evaluation objectives. We'll expect on this instrument that people will get 80% or whatever, some metric there. That will be our standard. Okay, so that's the third wall. You'd put that on this other wall, and then you'd start designing. So you have your evaluation objectives. You've got your situation objectives, you've got your learning point objectives. And by sort of incorporating all those, and you could probably have some other objectives in there, motivation objectives, etc., but I'm just trying to simplify it for now, that then you're sort of doing what Clark's suggesting. You're working backward from the evaluation objectives, then you're thinking about the situations and how the learning points would relate to those situations. So to me, that kind of idea makes more sense, but it also points out that it's not just our evaluation model that makes it different. It's also starting, that those learning objectives things we typically have a blind spot for. And if we had different objectives in there, more richness in it, that we'd do better.
So is there ever, let me ask this question, is there ever a time or is there ever a situation besides compliance? Let's put that part aside. Let's put that in a different bucket. Is there ever training work that needs to get done that does not require evaluation?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we may not have to evaluate all of our courses to learn from the experience. You know, we only have a certain number of resources. If my CEO tells me I can spend $50,000, $100,000 on evaluation, if I split that money and that time over 100 courses, I'm going to learn only a little bit. If I take that money and do an in-depth analysis of 10 of my courses, and we tend to use the same designs in many, I might learn more and then be able to improve, you know, what I do on those other 90 courses as well. So, you know, it's not an either or.
I want to answer slightly differently, and I'm aware we're coming to the end of the time, and I've got commitments. But I want to flip the question around, Brent. When would you undertake a training initiative in which you aren't trying to impact something? Why would you undertake a training initiative? You know, it's faith-based training otherwise.
Right, but so let me. It's a great question, but this is the reality that we all face. Consultants, maybe not so much, but those of us who have been embedded within training departments, within large corporate bureaucracies, have come across many times where all of the other aspects of the job, budgets, resources, demanding management who already have a solution in mind, you know, on and on and on and on, you know, not enough money to go through and carry out the evaluation. They just want the training done. This is a reality, right? This is the reality that a large portion of the L&D environment deals with on a regular basis. And while I think it's good that we're here today, you know, talking about things like the Kirkpatrick model, there's also this very real sense and the real activities that training people deal with on a daily basis within their corporate lives, and they have to make certain decisions. And so we can turn that question around, but the reality still remains. Do you put all your money? How do you convince somebody to say, you know what, instead of creating 10 training courses for you, what I'd like to do is take all your money and just evaluate everything that you've got so far, and then I'll tell you how much it's going to cost to create some training to solve all those problems and to make those impact the performance.
I want to switch that around. My goal is to make it just an automatic part of the process. It's a low overhead if you're doing it right. That you first identify, you have that business conversation with the business owner. What, you know, when they come and say, I want a course on X, say, well, what's the problem you're trying to solve?
And yes, okay, so stop. Let's role play this, Clark. Let's role play this. Here, Clark, you're my training guy. I'm the business unit. Clark, yeah, we're almost at that. Clark, I need training on XYZ by the end of the month.
What problem are you trying to solve?
Doesn't matter. Here's the content. I need training.
No, I mean, why you need that training and what problem you're solving, I refuse. I'm sorry, this isn't what it's about. I realize it sounds unrealistic and hard, but at the end of the day, the only way you're going, you know, if somebody comes and says, I want a product that does X, the product group doesn't go, okay. They say, what?
Yeah, no, that's not always true.
Where's the data?
Well, there's a lot of products out there that add stuff because they say okay. So anyways, yeah, good, absolutely great conversation.
I'm sorry, you've got me fired up.
You're right. You know, there's the reality that we all live in, right? And then there's the theory, and it's fun to have these conversations. I love you guys. I think it's great that you took the time out of your busy schedules to hang out with me and talk about this. This has been very fun. I hope everybody that's been watching has had a good time. The Twitter stream just has been crazy. with the people that have been watching on Meerkat as well. And we've had about up to 8 viewers or a little bit more on the Hangout on YouTube. So we should do this again. Pick another topic that you guys have debated, and let's go after it. Nothing but overwhelming responses on Twitter and on the comments saying we should talk about this stuff as a community more often and have these conversations. And so, and those are the types of things I've been hearing for a long time, which is why I was really happy that you guys agreed to do this with me. So I'll let you guys each just kind of close out, have your last final word, and then I'll let you cut back to your day jobs. Go ahead, Clark.
Thanks, guys, and thank you, Will, and thank you, Brent, for hosting this. And it's a fun conversation. I think it's an important conversation. I'm trying to help people, and I happily, work with organizations trying to get them to bring this on board, because at the end of the day, if we're not business smart, if we're not strategic in contributing to the organization, people are going to end up understanding that we aren't necessary. And we're going to continue to be the first budget cut, and we're going to continue to be not a seat at the table, and we're going to continue not being able. But when we are there, we are perhaps arguably the most important part. So we're facilitating optimal performance with training, and we're facilitating continual innovation that'll be the only sustainable differentiator. That's the opportunity on the table. That's what I am passionate about us missing and trying to help remedy that. Thank you all.
Awesome. Thanks, Clark. Will?
Well, and let me recommend to you Clark's book on revolutionizing, I'm not sure I got the words right, learning and development or learning and performance or something. Oh, he's going to go get it. Awesome. Or maybe he has to run. So, yeah, let me just, there it is, revolutionize learning and development. All right, way to go. So, yeah, this has been a great discussion, and I love going back and forth. And Brent, thank you so much for inviting us. One of the things I believe is that smile sheets suck. And so I've written a book that's coming out soon called Performance Focused Smile Sheets, a radical rethinking of a dangerous art form. And one of the things I believe is they do suck, but we can make them better, and we can make them better in such a way that they encourage us to think about some of the performance issues and stuff that Clark and I have been talking about. So I look forward to getting your reaction on that.
And I'll add a plug for it, because not only does it help make smile sheets, but it does a great job of educating about what's important in evaluation as well. So it's going to be a great public service.
And Brent, we'd love to do this again. You can see it's a love fest.
Yeah, absolutely. No, this is great. I've been wanting to do something like this for a long time, so this has been fabulous. And maybe we'll get a couple other guests on next time and have a larger debate about some particular topic or something. But this
absolutely. I want to be on Clark's team on the next one. Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we should have a game show format, like a Family Feud or something. I don't know. We'll figure something out. But anyways, I know you guys are super busy. I'll let you go. So we're done here for today. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it, guys. We'll do it again.
All right. Thanks, Brent.
All right. Take care. Bye, everybody.